Strategized character selection and narrative expansion for engaging YouTube content. Riley Foster knew she was failing. Not just struggling or falling behind, actually, completely, embarrassingly failing. Every morning at the Galactic Coalition Academy, she woke up in her tiny quarters and stared at the ceiling, wondering how long it would take before someone finally told her to go home. The Academy was impressive, she had to admit. Floating high above the planet Nexus Prime, it was a massive station where the galaxy's best and brightest came to train as military officers, tactical commanders, and fleet captains. Thousands of cadets from dozens of species walked the gleaming corridors. And every single one of them was better than Riley. Take the Scurry, for example. They looked almost like giant praying mantises, with 4 arms and compound eyes that could track multiple targets simultaneously. They moved so fast that Riley literally couldn't see them during combat drills. 1 second a Scurry cadet would be standing across the training mat, the next second Riley would be on the floor, completely disarmed, wondering what the hell just happened. Their instructor, a gruff Tauran named Vex, would just shake his massive head and move on to the next pair. The Taurans were even worse in their own way. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with bodies that looked like they were carved from stone. Pure muscle, thick armor-like skin, and strength that made human weightlifters look like children. During physical conditioning, Riley watched a Tauran cadet named Gorn casually lift a training weight that read 2,400 pounds. For warm-up. Riley's personal best on the same equipment? 75 pounds. She wasn't even in the same category. And then there were the Mindborn. They didn't speak much, these tall, slender beings with smooth silver skin and oversized heads. They didn't need to speak. They were telepathic. While Riley struggled to coordinate her small unit using hand signals and radio chatter, the Mindborn cadets simply thought at each other. Perfect coordination. Zero miscommunication. During tactical simulations, they moved like a single organism, anticipating each other's actions before they happened. Riley's roommate was a Scurry named Kiva, and she was honestly the only reason Riley hadn't packed her bags already. Kiva was kind in a way that made Riley's failures hurt even more. She'd stay up late helping Riley study, patiently explaining strategic concepts that came naturally to every other species. She'd practice combat drills in slow motion so Riley could at least see the movements. She'd bring Riley extra rations from the cafeteria because Riley kept missing meals while trying to catch up on assignments. But even Kiva couldn't hide the truth. One night, after Riley failed another combat simulation, Kiva had sat on her bunk and said very gently, "Riley, have you considered that perhaps your talents lie elsewhere? Administration, maybe? Or diplomatic services?" It was the alien equivalent of maybe college isn't for you. The worst part wasn't even the physical stuff. Riley had expected to be outmatched there. What really crushed her was the cognitive testing. The Academy measured neural processing speed, tactical thread management, and decision-making velocity. Basically, how many things you could think about and react to at the same time. The Scurry averaged 15 tactical threads. The Mindborn managed 20, sometimes 25 with their telepathic links. Even the Taurans, who weren't known for their intelligence, handled 5 or 6 threads easily, making up for it with combat instinct. Riley could handle 1 thread. Maybe 2 on a really good day. The testing computers had flagged her scores as potentially broken equipment. When they retested her and got the same results, the instructor had just sighed and marked her file. She was ranked 847th out of 850 cadets. The only reason she wasn't dead last was because 2 other species had cadets who'd gotten sick and withdrawn. By default, Riley Foster was effectively the worst student at the Galactic Coalition Academy. The instructors barely looked at her anymore. During strategy sessions, when Riley tried to suggest cautious, methodical approaches, they'd nod politely and then implement whatever aggressive blitz strategy a Tauran suggested. In combat drills, she was always the first one tagged out, sitting on the sidelines watching everyone else fight. In fleet command simulations, her careful resource management earned her a passing grade, barely, while Scurry cadets won top marks for flashy, high-risk maneuvers. She knew why she was still here. Everyone knew. Earth had just joined the Galactic Coalition 3 years ago. It was a big political deal. Humanity's first step onto the galactic stage. And the Coalition needed at least 1 human to graduate from the Academy, even if that human was completely, hopelessly outmatched. Riley was a diversity hire. A token human. A participation trophy. She'd heard instructors talking once, late at night when they thought everyone was asleep. "We might need to create a special track," one had said. "Modified standards for developing species." The other had agreed. They were being diplomatic, but Riley understood what they meant. Dumb it down for the humans. That night, alone in her quarters while Kiva was at advanced combat practice, Riley had cried for the first time since arriving at the academy. She'd worked her entire life to get here, had been the top of her class at Earth's military academy, had beaten out thousands of candidates for this spot. And in the real galaxy? She was nothing. Just a slow, weak, simple human trying to keep up with species that had evolved to be better than her in every measurable way. She had 6 months until graduation. 6 months of being the worst. 6 months of pity passes and diplomatic courtesy. 6 months of knowing she didn't belong. Riley stared at her test scores on the datapad and wondered if she'd even make it that long. Orchestrated engaging narrative expansion maintaining character consistency and platform compliance. By midterms, Riley had become famous for all the wrong reasons. She wasn't just the worst cadet anymore. She was the Academy's official charity case, the living proof that humans maybe weren't ready for the big leagues. And everyone knew it. The whispers started in the cafeteria. Riley would sit down with her tray, and conversations at nearby tables would suddenly drop to hushed tones. She'd catch fragments. That's the human. Can't believe she's still here. Heard she failed orbital mechanics 3 times. The scurry would click their mandibles and what she'd learned was their version of a dismissive laugh. The Taurans would just stare with those cold, reptilian eyes that said everything without words. Even Kiva, sweet, patient Kiva, had started acting weird. She'd still help Riley study, but there was something different now. A kind of resignation in her movements, like she was helping Riley not because she thought it would work, but because it was the right thing to do. Like volunteering at a charity you knew couldn't really solve the problem. The worst incident happened during a tactical briefing. Commander Harris himself was leading the session, a stern human officer who'd been serving in the coalition for 15 years. He was going over the midterm exam results, and when he got to Riley's name, he paused. Just for a second. But in that second, the entire auditorium had felt it. That uncomfortable silence when everyone knows something embarrassing is about to happen. Cadet Foster, he'd said, his voice carefully neutral. You passed. Passed. Not did well, or showed improvement. Just passed. The bare minimum. And then he'd moved on quickly, like he wanted to get past the awkward moment as fast as possible. Riley had wanted to sink through the floor. She'd studied for 3 weeks straight for those exams. She'd barely slept. She'd worked harder than she'd ever worked in her life. And all she'd earned was a pity pass and that horrible, weighted silence. After the briefing, she'd overheard 2 instructors talking in the hallway. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but they were standing right outside the equipment room where she'd gone to return her datapad. We need to discuss the human situation, one of them said. A mind born, based on the slightly echoing quality of the voice. I know, the other replied. Riley recognized that voice. It was Commander Harris. The Coalition Council is putting pressure on us. They want a human graduate. But her scores are abysmal, the mind-born finished. I've taught for 20 cycles. I've never seen a cadet struggle this much with basic tactical concepts. Her neural processing is simply too slow. I'm aware. So what do we do? Lower the standards. There was a long pause. Riley held her breath, pressing herself against the wall, her heart pounding so hard she was sure they could hear it. We're considering a modified track, Harris finally said. Special curriculum for developing species. Extended timelines, adjusted benchmarks, additional support systems. A remedial program. A specialized program, Harris corrected, but there was no conviction in his voice. They both knew what it really was. Will that even help? Commander, I say this with no disrespect to your species, but perhaps humans simply aren't ready for military service at this level. Perhaps a diplomatic corps position would be more suitable. That's not my decision to make, Harris said quietly. The politicians want this. We make it work. Riley had stood there in that equipment room for 10 minutes after they left, her hands shaking, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. Modified standards. Remedial programs. Her own species commander didn't even believe in her. The next week brought the fleet command simulation, and that's when things went from bad to worse. The exercise was supposed to test their ability to manage resources, coordinate multiple ships, and respond to dynamic threats. Riley had spent days planning her approach. Careful positioning. Supply line security. Defensive formations that could adapt to changing situations. She'd been proud of her strategy. It had earned her a 62%. Barely passing. Meanwhile, a Tauran cadet named Gorn had launched an aggressive assault, throwing everything at the enemy in the first 30 minutes. It was risky, borderline reckless. If anything had gone wrong, his entire fleet would have been destroyed. But it hadn't gone wrong. He'd won in 4 to 5 minutes with a decisive victory. The instructor had called it brilliant tactical aggression. Gorn got a 98%. Riley had tried to explain that her strategy would work better in real combat, where you didn't know all the variables, where mistakes meant actual lives lost. The instructor had nodded politely and moved on. Kiva had tried to comfort her afterward. Different species have different strengths, she'd said in that gentle, clicking voice. Perhaps your caution could be valuable in support roles. Support roles. Not command. Not leadership. Support. That night, Riley had gone to the observation deck, a huge transparent dome where you could see the stars. She'd stood there alone, looking out at the galaxy she'd dreamed of exploring, and felt smaller than she'd ever felt in her life. A group of cadets came in behind her. Scurry and Torrens, laughing about something. Their conversation died when they saw her. "Oh, the human," one of the Scurries said. "Does she come here to think?" a Tauran rumbled. "Must take a while with only one processing thread." They'd laughed. Not cruel laughter exactly, but not kind either. The laughter of people who genuinely found something amusing. Riley had left without saying anything. What could she say? They were right. By the time finals approached, Riley had accepted her reality. She was going to graduate, probably, because politics demanded it. She'd get some meaningless assignment at a supply depot somewhere. She'd spend her career filing reports while real officers, competent officers from competent species, did the actual work. She was a token. A symbol. A box checked on a diversity form. And there was nothing she could do about it. Strategized engaging narrative expansion emphasizing tension and emotional authenticity. The announcement came 3 weeks before graduation. Commander Harris called an emergency assembly, which was unusual enough to get everyone's attention. All 850 cadets packed into the main auditorium, the air buzzing with speculation. Riley sat in the back corner, as always, trying to be invisible. Harris stood at the podium, his face grim. Behind him, a holographic display showed a single ominous title, The Long Crisis. "Your final evaluation has been redesigned," Harris began without preamble. "Traditionally, you've faced combat simulations, tactical exercises, and command scenarios lasting no more than 6 hours. This year, the Coalition has implemented a new protocol." The hologram shifted, showing a timeline stretching across 72 hours. "The Long Crisis is a continuous simulation lasting 3 full days. No breaks. No timeouts. No save points. You will face a deteriorating situation in a war-torn sector with limited resources, incomplete intelligence, and no clear victory conditions." A murmur rippled through the auditorium. Even the confident Scurry cadets shifted uneasily in their seats. Harris continued, his voice steady but serious. "You will coordinate rescue operations across multiple civilian stations while enemy forces systematically destroy infrastructure. You'll make decisions with partial information. You'll manage dwindling supplies. You'll face moral dilemmas with no right answers. And you'll do it all for 72 hours straight." A Tauran cadet raised one massive hand. "Commander, what about rest cycles? Our species requires." "No scheduled rest cycles," Harris cut him off. "In real combat, the enemy doesn't wait for you to sleep. This simulation is designed to test not just your tactical skills, but your endurance, adaptability, and psychological resilience under prolonged stress." Riley felt her stomach drop. 72 hours. 3 full days without sleep. She'd barely managed the 6-hour simulations. How was she supposed to survive this? Around her, cadets were already calculating. The Scurry were clicking to each other in worried tones. Their metabolism ran hot and fast, burning through energy like wildfire. 3 days without proper rest would be torture for them. The Taurans seemed less concerned, their massive bodies built for endurance, but even they looked uncomfortable. The Mind-Born sat in eerie silence, probably communicating telepathically about strategies. "Food will be limited," Harris went on. "You'll have ration packs that must last the entire duration. Medical supplies will be scarce. Equipment will malfunction. And the scenario will continuously evolve based on your decisions. Success isn't about winning quickly. It's about managing an impossible situation for as long as possible." The hologram showed sample scenarios. Civilian stations losing life support. Supply convoys under attack. Wounded personnel needing evacuation. Enemy fleets cutting off escape routes. Moral choices, save 50 civilians here or 100 there, but you can't save both. Riley's hands were shaking. She gripped the edge of her seat to steady them. Your performance will be measured across multiple metrics, Harris said. Civilian survival rates. Resource management efficiency. Tactical adaptability. Decision-making quality under stress. And most importantly, sustained operational effectiveness over the full 72 hours. A mind-born cadet spoke, their voice that weird echo quality. Commander, this seems designed to cause system failure. What is the expected completion rate? Harris met their gaze steadily. In beta testing, approximately 8% of participants remained fully operational at the end of 72 hours. The auditorium erupted. 8%? That meant over 90% of cadets would fail before the end. Voices rose in protest, in confusion, in outright panic. Harris raised his hand for silence. This isn't about perfection. It's about seeing how you handle extended crisis conditions. The galaxy is dangerous. Real missions don't end neatly in 6 hours. We need officers who can function when they're exhausted, when resources are gone, when there's no good option left. Riley sat frozen, her mind racing. 72 hours. The scurry would burn out fast with their hyperactive metabolisms. The Taurans might last longer, but their aggressive strategies would probably backfire in a scenario with no quick victory. The Mindborn would have trouble with all the suffering and chaos affecting their telepathic senses. And her? She was already the slowest, the weakest, the worst cadet here. What chance did she have? Kiva leaned over, touching Riley's shoulder with one of her forearms. This is going to be brutal, she whispered, her mandibles clicking nervously. I don't know if my species can handle 3 days without deep sleep. We burn so hot, Riley. By hour 40, I might be hallucinating. Riley nodded numbly. Around them, cadets were already forming study groups, planning strategies, sharing concerns. The confident swagger that usually filled the academy had evaporated. Everyone was scared. You'll have 1 week to prepare, Harris announced. Use it wisely. The simulation begins at 0600 next Monday. You'll be transported to isolated simulation chambers. No communication with other cadets. No outside help. Just you and the crisis. He paused, looking across the sea of worried faces. I won't lie to you. This will be the hardest thing you've ever done. Some of you won't make it to the end. That's okay. How you handle failure matters as much as how you handle success. Dismissed. The auditorium emptied slowly, cadets moving like they were walking to an execution. Riley stayed in her seat, staring at the hologram still showing that 72-hour timeline. 1 week to prepare for 3 days of hell. 3 days where every advantage the other species had would be pushed to the breaking point. Riley took a shaky breath. She'd been failing all year anyway. At least now, everyone else might fail with her. She just had to survive. That's all. 72 hours. She could do that, right? Strategized engaging narrative expansion balancing drama with accessibility requirements. 3M7s. The first 24 hours went exactly as Riley expected. Which is to say, terribly. Her simulation chamber was a perfect replica of a command center on a dying space station. Alarms blared constantly. Red emergency lights pulsed. Her console showed 15 different crisis points across the sector, each one demanding immediate attention. Civilian stations losing oxygen. Supply convoys under attack. Wounded personnel screaming for evacuation. Enemy ships moving in patterns she could barely track. The scurry cadets must be dominating this, Riley thought as she struggled to process everything. Their lightning-fast reflexes and ability to track multiple situations at once were built for exactly this kind of chaos. She imagined Kiva somewhere in another chamber, her forearms flying across controls, making brilliant split-second decisions that saved hundreds of lives. Meanwhile, Riley was drowning. She could barely manage her small corner of the disaster. While her brain processed one crisis, 2 more would spiral out of control. She lost an entire civilian station in the first hour because she'd been too focused on coordinating a supply run. 53 casualties. The simulation AI informed her of each death with cold efficiency. By hour 6, Riley had already accepted she was going to fail. Her sector had the worst survival rates of anyone, probably. The Taurans were probably smashing through enemy lines with their incredible strength and aggression. The Mindborn were probably coordinating perfect rescue operations through their telepathy. But she kept going anyway. What else could she do? Quit? At least if she failed, she'd fail trying. She started doing what humans do when everything's overwhelming. She made lists. Priorities. She couldn't save everyone, so she focused on saving someone. She couldn't fix everything, so she fixed what she could. She set up basic systems. Rationed her limited supplies carefully. Created backup plans for her backup plans. It was boring, methodical work. Nothing brilliant. Nothing heroic. Just grinding through one problem at a time. Hour 12 came and went. Riley was exhausted but still functional. She ate one of her ration bars slowly, making it last. Drank water in small sips. Kept moving. Around hour 18, something strange started happening. The simulation AI began throwing curveballs that didn't make sense. Supply convoys arriving with damaged goods. Intelligence reports that contradicted each other. Enemy tactics that seemed random and chaotic. Riley realized with a cold shock what was happening. This wasn't just testing their skills. It was testing what happened when those skills started failing. Hour 24. Riley was still going. Tired? Yes. Making mistakes? Absolutely. But still clear-headed enough to function. She'd lost count of how many civilians had died in her sector. The guilt sat heavy in her chest, but she pushed it down. Grieve later. Work now. That's when things started to change. Hour 30. Riley's hands were shaking from exhaustion as she rerouted a medical ship. Her eyes burned. Her back ached from sitting in the command chair. But her mind was still working. Still processing. Still making decisions. She didn't know it yet, but across the academy, scurry cadets were starting to crash. Their super-fast metabolisms, the same ones that gave them incredible speed and reflexes, were betraying them. They burned energy like stars, and 3 days without real rest was pushing them past their limits. Their decision-making was getting sloppy. Reaction times slowing. Some were starting to see things that weren't there. Kiva, sweet Kiva who'd helped Riley study all year, had made a catastrophic error at hour 32. She'd routed a civilian evacuation ship directly into an enemy patrol. In her exhausted state, she'd misread the sensor data. 60 lives lost instantly. The simulation AI flagged her performance as severely degraded, and began increasing the difficulty in her chamber. By hour 36, Kiva had collapsed. Her body simply shut down, her consciousness flickering out like a candle in wind. She was evacuated from her simulation chamber by medical staff and given a final score based on how long she'd lasted. Riley knew none of this. She just kept working. Hour 40. Riley's eyes felt like sandpaper. She'd been awake for nearly 2 full days now. But humans, it turned out, were designed for this in a way other species weren't. Persistence hunters. That's what Earth anthropologists called early humans. They'd chase prey for days, not because they were faster or stronger, but because they just wouldn't stop. Riley had learned about it in a history class once. Hadn't thought much of it. Now, as she forced herself to stay focused on the console, it made a weird kind of sense. The Tauran cadets were failing now too, though for different reasons. Their aggressive strategies, which had won them praise all year, were backfiring spectacularly. The simulation wasn't designed for quick victories. Every aggressive push left them overextended. Every bold strike depleted resources they couldn't replace. Gorn, the massive Tauran who'd scored 98% on that fleet command exercise, had gone all in on a risky assault at hour 38. It failed. His entire defensive network collapsed. His rage and frustration clouded his judgment further. By hour 44, he'd made so many catastrophic decisions that the AI mercifully ended his simulation early. Failed. The Mindborn were suffering in their own unique hell. Their telepathic abilities, their greatest strength, had become a weakness. Every dying civilian broadcasted their fear and pain. Every wounded soldier screamed into the empathic void. The Mindborn cadets were being psychologically shredded by the accumulated trauma of thousands of simulated deaths. By hour 48, they started dropping like flies. Their mental shields, designed for normal operations, couldn't handle the sustained assault of a 72-hour crisis. Some withdrew into catatonic states. Others had complete breakdowns, sobbing in their chambers as the weight of all that suffering crushed their minds. Riley had no telepathy. She felt bad about the deaths, sure. The guilt was awful. But she could compartmentalize in a way the Mindborn couldn't. Human brains, it seemed, were good at putting trauma in boxes and dealing with it later. Hour 56. Riley was operating on pure stubbornness now. Her careful systems were paying off. She'd rationed supplies well. Built redundant networks. Made conservative choices that looked boring but kept things stable. Her sector wasn't winning any prizes. But it was still functioning. Life support still working. Civilians still being evacuated. Supply lines still moving. She was still in the fight. All around the academy, in hundreds of other chambers, cadets were failing. The brilliant were burning out. The strong were breaking. The fast were crashing. And Riley Foster, the worst cadet in the academy, just kept going. Orchestrated climactic conclusion revealing human resilience through Riley's triumph. Hour 72 arrived like a miracle Riley never thought she'd see. The simulation eye's cold voice announced the end of the evaluation, and suddenly the alarms stopped. The flashing red lights went steady. The crisis scenarios froze mid-action. Riley sat in her command chair, blinking at the console like she didn't quite believe it. She'd made it. 3 full days. 72 hours of non-stop crisis management, and she was still conscious. Still thinking. Still functional. Her body felt like it had been run over by a truck. Her eyes burned with exhaustion. Her hands trembled. Her back screamed in pain from sitting in the same chair for 3 days. But her mind, somehow, was still clear. Tired, yes. Foggy around the edges. But working. The chamber door opened and medical staff rushed in. They looked almost surprised to find her sitting upright. "Cadet Foster, can you hear me?" a medic asked, shining a light in her eyes. "Yeah," Riley croaked. Her voice was rough from not using it for 3 days. "I'm okay." "Is it really over?" "It's over. You made it." The medic sounded genuinely impressed. "Can you walk?" Riley stood up slowly, her legs shaking but holding. "I think so." They escorted her to the medical bay for evaluation. The hallways were chaos. Medical teams rushing everywhere. Some cadets were on stretchers, completely unconscious. Others were sitting against walls, staring at nothing. Riley saw a Tauran cadet crying, which was apparently something Taurans could do. She'd never seen it before. In the medical bay, a nurse checked her vitals and looked confused. "Your readings are better than expected," she said. "Elevated stress hormones, dehydration, exhaustion, but nothing critical. How do you feel?" "Like I haven't slept in 3 days," Riley said. "Because I haven't." "Most cadets who made it this far are in much worse shape," the nurse muttered, making notes. "You're cleared. Go get some food and rest. Results will be posted tomorrow at 0900. Riley found Kiva in the recovery wing. Her roommate was awake but looked awful, her compound eyes dim and unfocused. "Riley," Kiva clicked weakly. "You made it." "So did you," Riley said, sitting beside her bed. "No." Kiva's mandibles trembled. "I lasted 36 hours. My body just stopped. I don't even remember the last few hours. Just images. Fragments. I failed, Riley." "You lasted longer than most people could," Riley said softly. "Not long enough." Kiva closed her eyes. "I made such terrible mistakes at the end. So many people died because I was too tired to think straight." Riley held her friend's hand, saying nothing. What could she say? She'd made terrible mistakes too. They all had. That night, Riley slept for 14 hours straight. The next morning, the entire academy gathered in the main auditorium. Only about 600 cadets were there. The rest were still in medical, too broken to attend. The mood was somber, defeated. Everyone knew they'd failed. The question was just how badly. Commander Harris took the podium, and for the first time all year, he was smiling. "Congratulations," he said. "You all survived something that was designed to break you. Some of you made it to the end. Most of you didn't. But you all showed us something important about yourselves." The holographic display lit up behind him. Final rankings. Riley couldn't bear to look. She knew she'd be at the bottom. Last place, just like always. "Before I show the scores," Harris continued, "I need to explain something. The long crisis wasn't designed to test your existing strengths. It was designed to reveal a different kind of strength. One we've overlooked in the coalition for too long." He pressed a button and the rankings appeared. The auditorium went dead silent. Riley's name was at the top. First place. 94% operational effectiveness across all 72 hours. Highest civilian survival rate. Most efficient resource management. Best adaptive decision-making under sustained stress. Riley Foster. Rank 1 of 850. Riley stared at the screen, convinced she was hallucinating. This had to be a mistake. A glitch. A cruel joke. But Harris was talking, and everyone was turning to look at her. 4 centuries, The coalition has valued specialists, Harris said. The scurry are the fastest. The Taurans the strongest. The mind-born the smartest. Every species evolved to excel at something specific. And for short operations, that specialization is invaluable. He pulled up data charts showing cadet performance over time. Every species started strong and crashed hard around the 30 to 40 hour marks. Except humans. The human performance line stayed steady. Not exceptional, but consistent. But specialization comes with a cost, Harris continued. The scurry metabolism that gives them incredible speed requires constant energy. After 30 hours without rest, they start making critical errors. The Tauran aggression that wins quick victories leaves them overextended in prolonged engagements. The mind-born telepathy that allows perfect coordination makes them vulnerable to psychological trauma in sustained crisis situations. He looked directly at Riley. Humans evolved on what we call a death world. A planet so hostile that survival required a different strategy. Humans became persistence hunters. Not the fastest predator. Not the strongest. But the one that never stopped. That could track prey for days. That could survive ice ages, plagues, droughts, and disasters that wiped out specialized species. The hologram shifted, showing human evolutionary history. Humans walking across continents. Surviving climate changes. Adapting to environments from deserts to Arctic tundras. Humans don't excel at any one thing, Harris said. But they are adequate at everything. And that adequacy, combined with psychological resilience and the simple refusal to quit, means they can keep functioning long after specialists burn out. He pulled up more data. Of the 93 cadets who remained operational at Hour 72, 41 were human. Humans made up only 6% of the Academy population but 44% of cadets who completed the evaluation. We designed this test without considering human biology, Harris admitted. We thought we were testing tactical skills. Instead, we revealed something the Coalition desperately needs. In real combat, crises don't end in 6 hours. Supply lines break. Intelligence fails. Plans fall apart. And when that happens, we need officers who can adapt, endure, and keep making decent decisions when they're exhausted, terrified, and out of options. He smiled at Riley. Cadet Foster, you spent all year at the bottom of the rankings because we were measuring the wrong things. Speed in a sprint. Strength in a single lift. Intelligence in a snapshot. But we never measured what matters most in real command situations, the ability to survive the long crisis. The auditorium erupted. Not in applause, not exactly, but in a kind of shocked murmur. Cadets looking at each other. Looking at the handful of humans scattered through the crowd. Seeing them differently. Riley sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness. Something else. Something she couldn't quite name. The Coalition is changing its training protocols, Harris announced. We'll still value specialization. But we're adding human doctrines to our curriculum. Redundancy. Resource conservation. Psychological resilience. Sustainable operations. Because we've learned that being good at everything is sometimes better than being excellent at one thing. He looked across the auditorium. You're all dismissed. Except Cadet Foster. I need to discuss your graduation assignment. As cadets filed out, many of them stopped by Riley's seat. Offering nods. Respectful gestures. Kiva hugged her tight, mandibles clicking with pride and sadness mixed together. Riley walked to the podium on shaking legs. Harris extended his hand. Welcome to the real fight, Commander Foster. We have work to do. Riley shook his hand, and for the first time all year, she felt like she belonged. Humans don't quit. That's what we bring to the galaxy. And sometimes, that's enough.